Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to report a trade.
A blockbuster trade. This is a huge, mammoth-sized blockbuster trade.
Blockbuster. The Titans are trading wide receiver A.J. Brown.
What?
To the Eagles.
What?
Blockbuster trade, verified a tweet.
Oh my God! Do you see
What?
that? Do you see that?
It's one of the worst days that I've had in a long time.
There's nothing like a blockbuster trade, but not all blockbusters tend to work out. In today's video, I'm gonna be breaking down the top 10 worst trades in NFL history, and in the case of some of them, they set franchises back for decades. Well, I guess it could technically be a top 10 greatest trades of all time for the other team, but we're taking the low road today, people.
Number 10.
We're starting off this list with a little bit of juice, and when I say that, I mean the juice, because the 10th worst trade in NFL history involves none other than OJ Simpson. And I'm not talking about when CBS traded their coverage of the 1994 NBA Finals to instead watch live footage of police following his Bronco down the 405. I'm talking about 16 years earlier, when the San Francisco 49ers traded a second and third round pick in 1978, a first and a fourth in 1979, and another second rounder in 1980, all for a 31-year-old running back fresh off of knee surgery. Now, OJ was one of the most famous and likable athletes in America at the time, and had won an MVP just 4 years earlier, so 49ers new owner Edward DeBartolo Jr. saw this as an opportunity to sell more tickets and get butts in seats, but everybody else knew that OJ was near the end of his career and that this trade was an absolute fleece. That season, he rushed for just 593 yards, leading the 49ers to a 2-14 record, which meant that their first round pick they traded to Buffalo would actually be the number 1 overall pick, making this trade look so much worse. Quite predictably, OJ retired just 2 seasons in with the 49ers and would go on to, well, we all know what OJ would go on to do, or at least what he would do if he were to do it, in very small print. At the end of the day, as bad as this trade was for the 49ers, things still seemed to work out in the long run, because with their first round pick in the 1979 draft gone, they were forced to settle for some chump quarterback in the third round, who was named Joe Montana. And the Bills would use the number 1 overall pick on linebacker Tom Cuisinu, who didn't take one snap for them because the Canadian Football League offered him double the pay and he went to play for them instead. Just wild stuff.
Number 9.
At the number 9 spot on this list, I've got the Oakland Raiders trading Randy Moss to the Patriots for a 4th round pick. And honestly, you could pair this with the Raiders trading for Randy Moss just 2 seasons earlier. In 2005, the Vikings had gotten tired of the way Randy Moss was carrying himself, and with the team on the brink of a sale, they wanted to shed his salary, so they traded him to the Raiders for linebacker Napoleon Harris, the 7th overall pick in the upcoming draft, and a 7th round pick in the same draft. Now, Randy was putting up ridiculous numbers in Minnesota, so this didn't really seem like a bad trade on paper for the Raiders, especially because none of the picks or players involved ended up helping the Vikings at all. But the expectations and hype surrounding him died down pretty quickly, because after getting injured in week 6, he averaged less than 50 yards a game for the remaining 11 games. The following season, he played even worse, only going over 100 yards in one game and totaling just over 500 yards for the entire year. He was heavily criticized by the media for his lack of effort, but could you really blame him when the quarterbacks throwing him the ball were Kerry Collins, Aaron Brooks, and Andrew Walter? By the time 2007 rolled around, it was obvious that Randy wanted out of Oakland, and they settled on a singular 4th round draft pick from the Patriots to ship him out. That same year in New England, he put up 1,493 receiving yards and broke the NFL receiving touchdown record with 23 touchdowns. That's a record that still stands today. I guess the problem wasn't Randy all along, but also going from catching passes from Andrew Walter to Tom Brady is one hell of an upgrade. Unfortunately for Moss, a piece of gum on David Tyree's helmet would stop him from winning a Super Bowl and having the greatest season in NFL history, but things could have been worse. He could have still been on the Raiders.
Number 8.
The 8th worst trade in NFL history has a little asterisk next to it, because if you asked me 2 years ago, I would have had it much higher on this list, but things have slightly improved. I'm of course talking about the Chicago Bears trading the number 1 overall pick in 2023 to the Carolina Panthers for everything. Okay, not everything, but it sure felt like it, because in order to get the first overall pick, the Panthers had to give up star wide receiver DJ Moore, the 9th overall pick, the 61st overall pick, a 2024 first round pick, and a 2024 second round pick. Also, they could select 5'10" Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young, who got torn to shreds in his first season with the team. He was sacked 62 times in 2023, which was second worst in the league, and he ranked dead last among starting quarterbacks in practically every category. Now, it didn't help him that Carolina traded their best receiver to acquire Bryce, and I think a lot of the blame for the Panthers' offensive struggles that season can be credited to their lack of overall talent, and some of the worst coaching in football behind Frank Reich. It was so bad that the first round pick they traded to Chicago ended up being the first overall pick, which of course they used to select Caleb Williams and start to turn their own franchise around. In 2024, Bryce continued to struggle and was even benched in favor of veteran quarterback Andy Dalton, or the Red Rocket, hence why previously I would have ranked this trade much higher on this list. But Bryce had a bit of a bounce back in 2025, and while he lost in the wildcard round of the playoffs, there's a lot more hope surrounding his future with the Panthers. But also, he might be the next high-cost mid-quarterback that sets the Panthers franchise back another decade. So I guess time will tell if he moves up this list or off of it entirely.
Number 7.
At number 7, we're going back in time to 1974, when the Packers truly set their franchise back for years by trading for John Hadl with the Rams. 34-year-old John Hadl, that is, and the haul that they had to give up to get him was monumental to say the least. To land John, they had to give up their first, second, and third round draft picks in the 1975 draft, and their first and second round draft picks in the 1976 draft. Probably the most important detail to note about this trade is that free agency didn't exist at the time in the NFL like it does today, so the only way to build for the future was through the draft, which the Packers were somehow willing to mortgage for an aging quarterback. Even Hadl himself was shocked a team would give that much up for him, and it certainly didn't motivate him to live up to the price tag because he was horrible on the Packers. He played a total of just 22 games, throwing 9 touchdowns to 29 interceptions during his tenure. Meanwhile, the Rams turned their haul of draft picks into multiple starters, Pro Bowlers, and even used some of the picks to acquire Hall of Fame tackle Jackie Slater. John Hadl would ultimately be traded alongside more picks to the Houston Oilers for quarterback Lynn Dickey, who broke his leg in his second season with the team, leaving him with a limp for the rest of his career. The Packers' fortune would turn around a couple decades later though, thanks to Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers saving the franchise, but their trade for John Hadl is by far the worst move ever made in Green Bay's history. And that's saying a lot for a team that's over 100 years old.
Number 6.
The 6th worst trade in NFL history is tied to one of the greatest draft classes in NFL history, but just not for one team. I'm of course talking about the 1998 draft, which featured a highly debated topic of who's the better quarterback prospect, Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf. I have a feeling you know where this is going. Peyton Manning versus Ryan Leaf was a very real conversation at the time, with Peyton being the more polished and safe pick and Ryan being the higher upside and more athletic pick. Regardless of the debate, it was clear both guys would be going at the number 1 and number 2 spot in the draft. So with the Chargers sitting at pick number 3 and in desperate need of a quarterback, they would need to find a way to trade up. And trade up they did. The Chargers sent their 3rd overall pick, 33rd overall pick, their next year's first round pick, Pro Bowl wide receiver Eric Metcalf, and linebacker Patrick Sapp to the Cardinals to move up 1 spot. When draft day came, the Colts took Manning with the 1st overall pick, meaning that the Chargers were getting Ryan Leaf, one of the biggest busts in NFL history. Leaf actually managed to win his first 2 games with the Chargers, but in his 3rd game, he completed just 1 of 15 passes for 4 yards, 2 interceptions, and had 3 fumbles. But things only got worse from there, because not only did he have just 2 touchdowns and 15 interceptions for the team the rest of the season, but he was publicly lashing out at fans in the media all along the way. He'd only last 18 total games as a starter for the Chargers before bouncing around the league and ultimately retiring from the NFL at 26 years old. For the amount of draft capital San Diego had to give up to move 1 spot in a draft that featured 101 Pro Bowlers, including the likes of Randy Moss, Charles Woodson, and Alan Faneca, this is easily one of the worst moves in football history.
Number 5.
Now for number 5, this is probably my most controversial take on this entire list, which I honestly don't think it should be, and some of you will probably agree with me, but for those of you who don't, all I ask is you hear me out. The San Francisco 49ers were coming off an abysmal 2020 season, where they went 6-10 thanks to half of their roster going down to injuries, including starting quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo. After having gone to the Super Bowl just a year earlier, GM John Lynch wanted to swing for the fences, so he traded the team's next 3 first-round draft picks plus a third rounder in 2022 to move from the number 12 spot in the 2021 draft to the number 3 spot, which was held by the Miami Dolphins. All this just to take the 3rd quarterback in the draft, Trey Lance, gambling 3 years of the 49ers' future for a guy who played just 1 season in college for North Dakota State. Now, it was a pretty amazing year in college, and Trey certainly showed some promise as a 6'4" dual threat prospect, but there were questions about his game translating to the NFL, and it didn't take long to find an answer to that. He played just 8 total games in his time with the 49ers, starting only 4 of those games, and threw for a total of 797 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, before getting traded to the Dallas Cowboys for 1 measly 4th round pick. The reason people don't talk as negatively about this trade is because the 49ers also drafted Brock Purdy with the literal last pick of the same draft, and by some miracle, he ended up becoming a true franchise guy for them. But when you look at how Miami used San Francisco's draft capital, you can't help but think of how much more stacked this Niners team could have actually been, and that's on top of them already being insanely stacked. They turned those acquired picks into Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and Bradley Chubb, all huge pieces of Miami's resurgence prior to all of that CTE Tua collected. So Brock Purdy might have bailed the Niners out at the end of the day, but that doesn't make this trade any less worse than it truly was.
Number 4.
Remember earlier when I said the Panthers traded everything to move up and draft Bryce Young? Well, at the number 4 spot on this list, the New Orleans Saints actually gave up everything to move up. Like, all their picks. Saints head coach Mike Ditka wanted Texas running back Ricky Williams so bad that he traded all 6 of the Saints draft picks in 1999 as well as the 1st and 3rd round draft pick in 2000 to move up 7 spots with the Redskins and get him. Now Ricky was fresh off of winning the Heisman Trophy and was clearly the best talent in this draft class, but some teams were also concerned about his severe social anxiety. He often avoided eye contact with people and would even do interviews with his helmet on and visor down to keep himself more hidden. Back in 1999, football people weren't so keen on mental health issues, so there was concerns that he wasn't quite alpha enough to be an NFL football player. Especially when after the draft, he posed alongside Mike Ditka in a wedding dress for ESPN the magazine. Yes, this was a real photo shoot, not a Photoshop. While Ricky managed to be fairly productive for the Saints during his 3 years with them, the team went just 3-13 in his rookie season, and Mike Ditka was promptly fired. Ironically, they ended up trading him to the Dolphins in 2002 for 2 first-round draft picks, somewhat righting the ship that Ditka had tried to sink. But nonetheless, this was one of the strangest moves any NFL team has ever made, ever.
Number 3.
We've officially entered top 3 territory, and for number 3, you don't have to go that far back in time. Broncos country? Let's hide. Because in 2022, the Denver Broncos infamously traded with the Seattle Seahawks for Super Bowl champion quarterback Russell Wilson. In order to get Russ, the Broncos had to give up Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, the number 9 and number 40 overall picks in the 2022 draft, and their 1st and 2nd round picks in the 2023 draft. Now this was a pretty sizable haul for a 33-year-old quarterback coming off of an injury-riddled losing season, but Broncos fans were still pretty optimistic about the move overall. They already had one of the best defenses in the league, and getting a quarterback with a history of winning could have been that final piece they needed, but that's not how things went. After signing a 5-year, $245 million contract extension with $124 million of those dollars fully guaranteed the moment he signed, Russ went on to be one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire league. In his first year as a Bronco, he threw a career-low 16 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, led the league in sacks taken, and went 4-11 as a starter. On top of this, he went on one of the cringiest internet runs football has ever seen.
His name's Mr. Unlimited. You gotta be unlimited. You gotta have a thought process of being unlimited. So when people ask you what you're thinking about or what you want to do in life or where you want to go, you got to be unlimited.
Things got so bad that the Broncos literally had to pay Wilson $39 million just to leave the team. And honestly, that's what made this trade so historically bad. It wasn't just the draft capital they had to give up, but also an absurd amount of money. Meanwhile, Seattle built a Super Bowl championship roster with the acquired picks, and Broncos fans were left to pray at the altar of Bo Nix to bring life back to their team. And in fairness, he's kind of doing it, so good for you, Broncos country. I hope his foot heals for you.
Number 2.
The number 2 spot on this list actually spent decades as the number 1 spot on this list, but in light of recent events, I think something else has passed it, and we'll get into that shortly. Still, for all intents and purposes, this trade was apocalypse levels of bad. In October of 1989, the Dallas Cowboys straight up robbed the Minnesota Vikings in broad daylight in a trade that would ultimately involve 18 total players and draft picks. The primary player involved in this trade was Cowboys running back Herschel Walker, who was a true superstar coming off of a 1,500 plus rushing yards season. But the Cowboys weren't a good team, and new owner Jerry Jones wanted to make a splash, so he started a bidding war between the Browns and the Vikings to trade for Walker. After going back and forth, Jerry landed on these terms with the Vikings, which you can pause to read if you want because that's a lot of things that I don't really feel like reading. But there is one key component I'll point out that made this trade as bad as it was. You see, the Cowboys added a clause stating that if they cut any of the 4 players acquired during that season, they would be compensated with future first and second round draft picks. The Vikings assumed that none of the players would be cut because the Cowboys were bad enough that they would need to play them, but the Cowboys saw this as an opportunity to cut them all anyway and rebuild their roster with all of the Vikings picks. At first, the media actually thought the Vikings had fleeced the Cowboys because nobody realized the conditions on the traded players, but once everything came to light, the narrative completely flipped. With all of those new shiny draft picks, Dallas built a dynasty, going on to win 3 Super Bowls and even grabbing future Hall of Fame running back Emmitt Smith in the process. Minnesota, on the other hand, never saw Herschel Walker rush for more than 825 yards in a single season, and after just 3 years, they let him walk in free agency. For as much justified criticism Jerry Jones has received in recent years, this was his magnum opus, and will literally never see anything like this trade ever happen again. Before I get to the number 1 worst trade in NFL history, there's a few honorable mentions I feel are worthy of mentioning. The first being the Redskins trading up 4 spots in the 2012 NFL Draft to select quarterback Robert Griffin III. This move cost them 3 first-round draft picks and a second-rounder, but I kept it off this list because RG3 had one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time, and it was on track to be well worth the price had he not had a devastating knee injury in the playoffs. The second honorable mention is the Houston Oilers trading the NFL's future all-time receiving leader Steve Largent to the Seahawks for an 8th-round draft pick. At the time of this trade happening, nobody knew anything about Steve, so it's hard to knock the Oilers for dealing him, but it's also incredible just how prolific of a player he ended up becoming for just an 8th-round draft pick. And finally, my last honorable mention goes to the Jets trading head coach Bill Belichick to the New England Patriots. The Jets were kind of forced into this move as Bill tried to resign just one day into his tenure with the Jets, but the league forced the Patriots to give some form of compensation, mainly in the form of a first-round draft pick, but it certainly paid off in the long run for the Pats and prolonged Jets fans suffering for decades.
Number 1.
We've made it, we've arrived, it's time for the number 1 worst trade in NFL history. And it happened just 4 short years ago, or in the case of being a Browns fan, 4 long, grueling years ago. For some reason, people tend to hesitate when calling this the worst trade ever, but I think just enough time has finally passed to crown the Browns trading for Deshaun Watson as the king of stink. This trade makes Russell Wilson to the Broncos look like Super Weenie Hut Jr. in comparison, because the amount of picks and guaranteed money involved on top of the PR nightmare was all-time historically bad. In order to get Watson, who mind you hadn't played football in 439 days due to him facing 22 active civil lawsuits, the Browns had to give up 3 first-round draft picks, 1 third-round pick, and 2 fourth-round picks to acquire him from the Texans. On top of this, they gave him a staggering $230 million fully guaranteed contract extension. That was the largest fully guaranteed contract in NFL history for a guy who, I'll say it again, was facing holding 22 active civil lawsuits and hadn't played football in 439 days. After the NFL and NFL's Player Association negotiated a punishment for Watson, he was suspended for 11 games in 2022 and fined an NFL record $5 million, which in the scope of his guarantees was a drop in the bucket. Throughout this time, Watson reached private, out-of-court settlements with his accusers, and as of January 6, 2026, he no longer has any pending lawsuits. So far in his 4 seasons with the Browns, he's played in a total of 19 games, going 9-10 and throwing just 19 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. To put things in perspective, if you do the math, every pass that he's completed for the Browns has cost them roughly $670,000 per completion. And to think I thought having an orange helmet as the logo for a team named the Browns was bad enough, this is a whole new level of low. If you agreed with my list, let's go. You know ball. And if you disagreed with my list, I'll allow it this one time, but let me know in the comments what you would have changed or trades that maybe I didn't mention. 99.7% of you watching aren't subscribed, so let's change that, try to get it to like 98.9% at least. It would do a lot for my soul. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers, so get your early tickets while they last. I've been promising smooches for doing so, and clearly it has not been working so far as only 0.3% of you want the smooches, so let me know what else you want, and I'll do my best to give you pleasure. As always, thanks so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to right here, the end of the video. That means you are a real one, and I appreciate you. And leave a comment that says, smooches are my favorite, okay? There's the smooch if it is your favorite. If it's not your favorite, take it right back. Don't need it. Whatever you prefer, I appreciate that you're here. So that's all I'm trying to say. This is going on way too long. Until next time, goodbye.